Hello everyone, I'm so glad you're back. Today we're going to finish up our series, Happiness is Homemade. How is your quilt coming along? So I thought I would finish up this series in a little bit of a different style of video. I'm going to turn on the camera today and bring you through the next couple days of my work week. And I say work week, but I'm really going to have tons of fun. I haven't been feeling that great. I had a tooth pulled Friday and I've been recovering from that. So I have not had the cameras on. However, I have my quilt loaded. So I've loaded the backing, the batting, and my quilt top. And to be really honest, because I feel like we're family and I like keeping it real with you. Up until I had this quilt on my frame, I really wasn't sure how I wanted to quilt this quilt. I was torn between doing just an all-over edge-to-edge quilting design on the quilt. But I also was open to the idea of doing a little bit more of a custom quilting on this quilt. So I was still open-minded as I loaded the quilt on this frame. Now, one of the things that I wanted to cover before we get started in this week's video, we are all different. I'm going to be quilting my quilt on a long arm. Not everybody has a long arm. Not everybody wants a long arm, right? Some of us would rather hand quilt our quilts. Some of us would like to just sit down and do some tying with their quilts. Some of you like quilting on your domestic sewing machines. So we're all different. Imagine how boring this world would be if we were all the same and did the same exact thing. That would be so boring, right? And so keep that in mind as I bring you through and show you what I plan to do with the quilting on my quilt. Because we're all different. And to be really honest, I can't wait to see what you do with your quilt. So I did not film loading the quilt on the long arm. I do have a video if you're interested in purchasing a long arm, or maybe you just got one and you want to see that process. I'll put a link to a video where I show, it's an older video, but I'll show you the process. Not everybody is interested in that part. So I just left that out. Plus I really wasn't feeling all that great when I put this quilt on the long arm anyway. But I will show you what I've decided to do with the quilting on my quilt. I'll bring you over there in just a second. We're going to take a look at what I've done so far, and it's not much. And then I thought I'd turn on the camera and actually film me quilting parts of this quilt. And then yeah, I don't even know that we're going to bind this quilt together. I'll show you the 3 fabrics that are contenders for binding. I still haven't made up my mind on that. I don't know why I'm being so indecisive on this quilt. Usually I have a plan right from the get-go, but there's 3 fabrics and I just can't make up my mind which one I want to use for the binding. Maybe one of them will speak louder as I come to finish up this quilt. But yes, I thought today's video would be a little bit different. A little bit non-structured, and I'm just going to bring you like a little video blog as I work the next couple days on this quilt. I think that would be fun. So just because this is the end of this video series, I still want to encourage you, if you want to share pictures of the progress of your quilt, here's the email. I'd still love to see them, and I'd still love to do a video slideshow in the future of everyone's quilt if you want to participate in that. And I'll be making an announcement over here on YouTube and on Facebook when we're going to release that video. That'll give you some good time to work on your blocks. And even if you don't have your quilt done by then, but you want to share your progress, I know we'd all love to see it. I saw a quilt over on the Creative Crew group. Someone just finished their quilt top and they did it in all scrappy blues. It was phenomenal. So yes, I'd really love to share your work, share this quilt with others. And yeah, we're going to have fun in this video. Just going to bring you along in the next couple of days. So let's move you over to the long arm. I'll show you what I've done to this point, which isn't much. So here we are with the quilt on the long arm frame. And I've done my first pass, which really gave me my plan of approach for quilting this quilt. Just thought I'd show you before I actually do some quilting with you. In the border area, I decided to do some straight line quilting about 1 inch apart right in the brown border, and I carried that up through the top portion of the border as well. In the sashing, I thought I would absolutely just leave that the way it is. So I have stitched in the ditch, in the brown border, and in my beige block itself. That'll give plenty of support for the border so there's no rippling, but I'm just going to leave my sashing just like it is. And then in my blocks, I did a stitch in the ditch around my applique and just a smaller meandering in the actual background itself. Now I think because I haven't been feeling that great, I've just been off my A game. Do you ever feel like that? I just feel like yesterday I just wasn't doing my best work. So after the first pass, when I, realized that I was just getting frustrated, I walked away from the quilt. And we're going to come back today renewed, refreshed, and I'm feeling a little bit better today, so I'm hoping that things go smoother. But yes, if I could share one piece of advice with you, is that if you are working on a quilt or any other type of project, and you just are not getting the results that you're looking for, or you're getting frustrated, my advice is to stop what you're doing, put it down and walk away, because this is supposed to be fun, right? And if you're producing results that you know that you can do better and you're getting frustrated, just walk away from it. Take a break. And that's what I did yesterday. And so today I'm thinking that maybe I could film some and bring you along. As simple as the straight line quilting is in the border, don't you just love that? You can see the little bit of sun coming in through the window. It gives it just a little bit of definition. So yes, I do love that. And the quilting is simple, right? I'm not doing all this crazy quilting. It's just simple meandering and stitching in the ditch and straight line quilting in the border. But I think when I'm done, I'll be glad that I did it this way. Yeah, we'll see. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on my machine and get that ready. And I'll advance the quilt and maybe we'll stitch out these gingerbread men together. Now, before I begin quilting, I just want to pop in and say, I've put some links to some really helpful videos down in the description box. If you are considering this quilt as a quilt as you go type of quilt and you've never done it before, I've checked out some videos and I found these videos really helpful in explaining the process, especially if you're new to the concept. But what Quilt As You Go does is it opens up the possibility to do custom quilting, individual sections at a time, which is much more manageable in a sewing machine with a smaller throat space. And then you piece it all together once your quilting is done, and you can do some custom, pretty quilting on a larger quilt in a much easier way. So I hope you give these videos a go down in the description box below. If you assembled Happiness is Homemade as a quilt as you go, I'd love to hear from you down in the comments section. All right, I'm ready to turn on this long arm. Let's get busy. Here we are. I've advanced the quilt just a little bit. The first thing I like to do is go ahead and quilt my borders. That base down my quilt with the batting and the backing on both sides. And then I'll do my quilting in the border section first. I'm using a brown top thread and a brown bobbin thread as well. I'm going to show you right here the type of quilting thread that I'm using for this quilt. I got 3 colors. I got a chocolate brown, I got a burgundy, and then a camel color for the background. I am using the same color thread in the bobbin as I am in the top of my machine. It takes away the stress of having to get that tension exactly perfect. On the back of my quilt, you will see different colors of thread, but I happen to like that. So I have a chocolate brown color thread. What I've done is I've gone through and measured with my little ruler and marked some little marks 1 inch apart from one another down the side of my border with a chalk marker. And now I'm just going to use a ruler and do some straight line quilting in this border. Once I'm done, I'll move over to the other side. We'll do that other side off camera. And then we'll do some quilting in one of our blocks. We'll do the gingerbread block together. Straight line quilting, you can absolutely do this on your domestic machine as well. And I find it really helpful if you give yourself some chalk reference marks to help you keep the spacing as accurate as you possibly can. So now I'll go ahead and stitch the border with you and get that quilted. I'm going to pull up this bobbin thread. Lock those stitches in. And now I'm ready to start quilting. I'm going to go ahead and baste my quilt along the side. Whoops, I was on the wrong stitch. All right. And there we are. We have quilted our lines in the border. Bring up that top thread. I don't know where my snips are. Let's cut that thread. And now we can move to the other side and quilt the border over there in the same manner. You'll notice that when I was traveling in one direction or another, I traveled in the same stitch that I stitched the ditch with. And yes, you can move along and travel in previous stitch lines to move from one place to another. just because you have the ability to go fast, it doesn't mean you have to. So I like to just put on music and take my time and try to stay as straight as I possibly can. So now I'm going to go over, stitch the other border as well, and then we're going to move to the gingerbread block. Now we're going to go ahead and quilt this gingerbread block together. I've changed out both the bobbin and the top thread to the camel color. I think that blends in really nicely with the background. The first thing I'm going to do is stitch in the ditch all the way around my block, close to but not touching the sashing, if I can do that. And then I will stop. I'll stitch in the ditch around each one of my gingerbread men, and then I'll do the background, filling in the open space of the block with a smaller meandering. I think I'll speed up this part of the video because I do think this is going to take a few minutes. I don't want to rush through it, but I want the video to go a little bit quicker so you don't get bored with me. So we'll speed up the video and you can watch and follow along. And here we are with our finished gingerbread man block. I think he's adorable. Now, I hope this gives you some creative ideas if you're wondering how to quilt your quilt. A simple meandering works brilliantly to fill in bigger background areas around applique. What I also like about the meandering is there's no two that are exactly alike. It's sort of like your own little signature on your quilt. All right, I think I'm going to finish filling in the bottom of the cookie jar block. There's a small area I couldn't get to when the quilt was up there. And then, yeah, I think I'll turn on the camera at different parts of this quilt. I think you get the main idea of how I plan on quilting it, but you might also find it relaxing to follow along. we'll see how my week goes. Because we did some video of my actual quilting, I thought we could speed up today's video by doing just some before and after pictures of the quilting as I progress through this week. And you get to see each one of the blocks before and after it's quilted. I'd love to hear about your ideas on how you might quilt your quilt down below in the comments section. We'll take a look at this part of the quilt before it is quilted. And then after it's done. I really like how the applique pops up off of the quilt when you do a lot of quilting in the background area. Advancing the quilt again, and now we're going to fill in this part of the quilt. Some before pictures, and then after it's quilted. The quilting makes a huge difference, don't you think? I really love these cupcakes. Makes me want to go in the kitchen and bake some. Coming down towards the bottom of the quilt. Some before pictures. And then again after it's quilted. Coming all the way down to the bottom, I knew I did not want to put a quilt label on this quilt, so I just signed my name and put the year and the quilting at the bottom in the border. And this finishes up all of the quilting. So now we're going to move over to the binding. I'll show you my 3 fabric choices for binding. And you know what? I cannot decide which one I want to do. So I'm going to do them in alternating colors, these 3 colors, and make my binding with all 3. For this quilt, you'll need 9 strips of binding. So I have my strips here at the sewing machine, and I'm going to join them. For this quilt, I thought it would be pretty if I join them with a 90-degree angle, just like you see me doing here. I'm using a square ruler, marking my 90 degrees, and then I can bring that over and sew from corner to corner. You can do this freehand without marking your line if you're good at it. I am not. The line just helps me keep straight from corner to corner. Flipping the binding up, pretty side facing up. The next piece will go pretty side facing down. And we will mark a 90-degree angle from corner to corner, just like you see me doing here. I usually just join my binding, matching up the raw edges. On this quilt, because I'm using different colors, I thought it would be pretty if I joined them with a 90-degree angle, just like this. It also provides a little less bulkiness in your seam underneath of the binding. This does take a little bit longer. I don't do it this way on every single quilt, just being honest with you. You can also just use a straight edge ruler and make your line as well if you don't have a smaller and easy to work with square ruler. And I'm using a heat erasing pen, and so when I press my seam allowances, these marks will disappear. So I'll go through and join all of my binding. I think for this quilt, it's worth the extra time to join my binding this way. And I just thought it would be fun to bring you along so you could see part of this process. We'll sew one more with you, and then I'll finish up this binding. Once you're done joining all of your binding, you're just going to trim the little triangle and leave yourself about a 1/4 inch beyond your seam. And then we can go and finish up our binding. Over at the pressing board, each time I come to a seam, I'm just going to open up that seam and press it nice and flat. And we'll iron a portion of this binding together. Just going to take it and fold it right in half. I like to cut my binding strips at 2.5 inches. And then just fold it right in half, match up your 2 raw edges, and press all the way down. Whenever I come to a seam, I just open it up and press it flat and keep on with the rest of my binding. With 9 strips of binding, you will have a good little bit left over when you're done binding your quilt. I like to save those pieces and use them on smaller projects or join them all together once I have enough and make a really fun, eclectic binding for a quilt. Once you're done pressing your binding, we're ready to go ahead and attach it to the quilt. You can attach your binding to the front or the back, whichever way you prefer. For this quilt, I'm going to sew it to the back first. And I'll just bring you along for part of this process. We'll do the first corner together. Joining our binding with a 90-degree angle gives a really nice effect, especially when you're using different colors like this. You can see I have to adjust the quilt, sew a little bit, adjust the quilt, sew a little bit. And then once you make it all the way around, we can flip the binding to the other side. You can either hand sew your binding down if you prefer, or stitch it with the machine like I'm going to do with this quilt. I'll just bring you along as I stitch some of this binding down. If you've never done a binding before on your quilts, I do have lots of tutorials that you can go and check out that walks you step by step through the whole entire process. And there's so many different ways that you can do it. Let's take a look at the back of the binding real quick. So this is the back of the quilt after the binding is sewn on the front. And now I'll just continue on, sewing it down. I'll finish up the rest of the binding off camera. And once we're done, this is what the binding looks like from the back side, or no, I'm sorry, the front side of the quilt. And now we'll take a look at the back side. So I think that turned out really pretty. And now we can take a look at my quilt all finished. This is from the back side. We'll do a couple of different views so that you can get an idea of what the back of my quilt looks like. I think it turned out so pretty. And then we'll flip the quilt around and take a couple of pictures from the front. Even though the quilting is very simple, I think it gives this quilt so much dimension. And I absolutely love it. So here we are. It is late Thursday, like dinner time. And I just finished the binding on this quilt. Talk about down to the wire. This video comes out tomorrow. So thank you so much for following along in this week. It's been a long week, y'all. I still don't feel that great recovering from this tooth. I'm still really sore. And it's been a week tomorrow. So what I did is just brought you along throughout my week. I really do wish that I would have recorded more of the quilting, actual quilting with you, but I just was not feeling my normal self this week. So I think actually just taking pictures of the process as I worked on this quilt really did more justice versus me struggling through quilting this quilt. And I tried to enjoy it the best I could. I wish I felt better. But anyway, are there mistakes in my quilt? Yes, about 500 of them. Am I going to point them out to anybody? Nope. And so I hope that you feel the same way. If your quilt has mistakes, the only person who's going to see them is you, right? So, shh, let's not tell anybody. My quilt is far from perfect, but do I love it any less? Absolutely not. I think it is fabulous and I love it. I cannot wait to put it downstairs somewhere. The colors go great with everything downstairs. And I really hope that you enjoy making this quilt as much as I have enjoyed it. I've enjoyed spending time with you these last several weeks. I've enjoyed getting to know you, see your pictures, hear your comments. I have enjoyed hearing your journey through making this quilt. It has just been so much fun. Here in just a second, I'm going to share Melissa's photo. I love her quilt top so much. It's so exciting. I don't know what we're doing next. I have about 4 or 5 ideas. I just don't know which one I'm going to do first. Have you ever been like that? This week has just been so indecisive for me. Okay, I am off to go cook some dinner and edit this video. I'm so glad y'all have hung in with me throughout this series. I can't wait to see you really soon. Have fun creating this quilt. We'll see you. Bye.